Okay, we are recording. Charlie, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Not too bad.
Good, good. I
Thank you
mean,
for having
that's
me
a
on.
massive lie. I mean, we've just had a chat before we've done this fake hello, and you're poorly, aren't you, mate? You're run down. Your missus has
Yeah,
had
yeah,
enough of
yeah,
you
yeah.
and your little one because you're both poorly, and you got no excuse either. You've
Yeah.
been out on tour having a blast, so you ain't even going to get any
Yeah.
sympathy.
This is it. You've exposed me within 30 seconds as being a terrible liar. That's it. You've done it.
Oh, brilliant. Well, where's home? Where are you today?
I'm in Hertfordshire, so just
Oh,
about
nice.
like, about an hour north of London. So yeah, I live in a tiny village surrounded by a bunch of fields and woods. I'm very lucky. It's very quiet. It's basically just old people that live here, and yeah, it's lovely.
Oh, wonderful.
I
Well,
cannot complain.
in regards to living somewhere, relatively peaceful and remote, how did that affect the sort of 18 months of lockdown for you? Would you sort of hold that as a positive, having that kind of greenery around you? And also talk me through how you dealt with that time creatively as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason we're here is because of that, really. So previously we were living in a basically a suburb of London, small town, and it was fine, but it was very we were quite we were lucky enough to have a place that was big enough for myself and my little boy, but I don't know. I think like everyone, I grew up kind of with with quite a lot of access to nature. My grandparents lived in the countryside. There's a lot of very happy memories for me, being around nature, and I think it was a big driver for us to kind of move here. Really, is that I think it became increasingly clear over the kind of last 18 months that access to nature and space and animals and all of those kind of things was pretty fundamental for me coping, especially in terms of my mental health. And we were lucky enough to be in a position where we could say, right, let's try and find somewhere, let's move somewhere. Because I know a lot of people aren't. So yeah, so I think that 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 kind of I think that like 18 months really, I think I'm sure like a lot of people, it kind of focused on my mind and my family's mind, what was important to us. And
Sure.
I think we went through quite a lot of different stuff, and there were some really happy moments in that. My little boy was only 18 months old when the lockdown began, and we spent a long time seeing him grow up. But similarly, we went through, me and my wife went through some kind of personal tragedies as well, that were hard to deal with. And I think being around nature for me has been a big kind of solace and balm.
Yeah.
When things get a bit tough and my brain my brain ticks over at quite a fast speed, I'll just take myself off for a walk, and I think that for me has been really really positive, having that level of solitude. Um, Creatively, I think it really has helped as well. I think we were writing this new record at kind of end of the last lockdown, and it was quite an intense time. And I was traveling into London to see the boys who were recording there, and there was a lot of things going on. And I think having a sanctuary to kind of come back to and kind of reassess. And I think also as well, it made me reassess my relationship with the country, and with England and Great Britain, and I think that that comes through maybe a little bit in the creativity and the writing, is that I'm at once in love with this place, and it really
Yeah.
defines me, but at the same time I'm equally kind of I wouldn't say I wouldn't say disgusted, maybe that's the wrong word, but there's a
No,
revulsion
I think I
that
think
comes with
I
it,
think
you know
disgusted's all right.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And how those things interplay with
Sure.
how I feel about being someone from this place in this country, and the things that are done in the name of this country and this, landscape and land and
Yeah.
all of that stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, there you go.
I'll tell you what. Let's park up politics because that can end up getting bleak, certainly at the moment. So let's talk about the joyous, the joyous thing that
Yeah.
is music. So I'm going to ask you to kick off your playlist, mate. with the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please, Charlie.
Greatest ever intro. Wow, that is that. I'm gonna say I've picked Iggy and the Stooges' "Search and Destroy." That's my.
Okay,
I'm gonna mix it up a little bit here.
okay,
Yeah, greatest ever intro. I think that for me, it's just that those first kind of like, I think it's like three chords or whatever, like down, 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 down. It's like it just like instantly you're in. Do you know what I mean? You're
yeah,
like, and when he's got that opening line, like, what is it? I'm a sleepwalking cheater with a heart full of
yeah,
napalm, and it's just like bang in, love it. I'm buying what you're selling. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think for me, that, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about like my kind of, I suppose my gateways into these little musical moments and stuff. But for me, as a kind of punk song, and as a kind of expression of like, I don't know, it's not necessarily rage, but there's this kind of like pent up kind of energy to it. I just love it when it just comes in.
yeah.
It's just so powerful.
It's raw as fuck as well, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, and it's like the album's called Raw Power. Do you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
of
It's
course,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah,
like it just. I mean, it says what it does on the tin, and it's so charismatic and so like vital and vibrant,
yeah,
and in a way, I don't mean this in a condescending way at all. There's like a kind of like like a simplicity to it that's so like powerful.
100%.
Even though it is, it's not a simple song. It's not, it's energetic, it's powerful. There's so much going on there, but like it just whacks you. And I think, when I was younger, especially, you hear stuff like that for the first time, and I was just so engaged by like, I don't think
Yeah,
I'd even seen Iggy Pop by that point, but I was like,
yeah,
who is this guy? Do you know what I mean? And then you see the
yeah,
pictures of him and his performance, and you're just like, whoa, this is like, yeah, I'm in.
yeah, absolutely. In regards to intros, Charlie, when it comes to writing,
Yeah.
um, talk me through your sort of approach to it, and essentially the intro. And do you ever give consideration or time to think about the benefits of maybe being on a Spotify playlist? Does any of that ever filter through to the your creative process of that? Right, well,
Yeah.
we got to, there can't be any fat on this. It's got to, hook them straight away. Because I know in more, I guess, mainstream pop music that's
Yeah.
very much a consideration and almost a science with some of these songwriting teams that you get in Sweden or wherever. But
Yeah.
I just wonder how you approach it.
I mean, we probably should give more consideration to it. We probably, to be up there, with the
Yeah,
algorithm, whatever. But yeah, it's a hard one. I think it's down to also the intention of the song, and how you're making a song and what it's about. And I think for me, I'm maybe a bit strange in the sense that like I have to have an intention to the song before we write it. I have to believe or know the story of it, or
mm,
what I want to try and communicate. I think that's how I view making music and art in particular.
sure.
It's me trying to communicate stuff I can't necessarily talk about. So yeah, I think there is also kind of sometimes there is a consideration as to being like, we want to make a song that's more aggressive, more energetic, more angry. And I think, for an intro in that respect, going down into that kind of like pure songwriting vibe, I think, yeah, sometimes there is a consideration where it's like, yeah, we want to just go straight in, like, let's just not fuck around, let's just go for it.
Yeah,
But I think I think you're probably getting into problems when I mean, for me at least, and for us as a group of musicians, I wish that we could kind of be a bit more scientific sometimes. But I think we get into problems where we try and write stuff that we think people are going to want to hear. I think for us, like, we're quite sincere people, and we're quite honest with each other, just as a band. And I think that maybe rubs off in our music and how we hopefully present ourselves. So I think if we were thinking too hard about like, yeah, this has got to be this kind of way,
yeah,
I think, I mean, we've got 100 demos in the bank that have been like us trying to do that, and there's a reason why they're still in the bank and not
yeah, yeah,
not on a record. It's because somehow we've never quite translated it from an intention of like, yeah, we should write this thing that like people will love from the minute it starts. and then you get down the line maybe 2 months and you're like, nah, it doesn't mean anything, it's just nonsense. And I think that for us is maybe, but yeah, maybe we should pay a bit, maybe we should get a bit more scientific, have a look at some of those formulas, you know. It might be easier.
All right. Well, I'm going to take you back now for track two. I'm going to ask you, please, to tell me the first song that you remember hearing, Charlie, that had an emotional impact on you, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna. This is gonna be a weird one, but I'm gonna talk about. It's King Crimson, 21st
Okay.
Century Schizoid Man. So this for me is like, and this for I think the rest of the lads is a bit of like, it's a bit of a, again talking about gateways. I think before this I was listening to, you know, I grew up at the time of kind of like, you know, I was in that weird time of like post Brit Pop kind of, it was like that all American kind of new metal kind of vibe, you know, leading
It's
into emo.
it's a weird time, that, because post Britpop, like, everything kind of felt like American Pie come out, and then everybody just looked to the States for this,
Yeah,
you know, for you know, Blink and Sum 41, and then Alien Ant Farm and all of that, and then into, like, you
yeah,
know, the sort of new metal stuff and that. But in the UK, it kind of just got very serious. Like, all of a sudden, all the big bands were like chewing breaks, like
right, yeah,
Travis,
yeah, 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 yeah,
Star
yeah, yeah,
Sailor. It was all very acoustic, like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it all sort of got quite. I think from the kind of jovial fun of what people, you know, call Britpop or whatever, it all just got very singer-songwriter. You know, I guess
yeah,
Radiohead really come into their own around that point as well, and
yeah,
it just
yeah.
felt like it's quite a strange time for British music. That I guess, you know, on the sort of more mainstream sort of side of it, it got very acousticy and serious.
Yeah, and I think that was what led me to kind of, you know, I think, and certainly like people of my generation growing up at that time, I think a lot of our cultural touch points were American, you know, and it
Mm.
was very rooted in skateboard culture, and you know, but it was weird because it was very, you know, it was like very, you know, it seemed kind of punky, but actually looking back on it now, it was like completely uninclusive space. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? It was like it was very odd, and so I think, you know, you kind of dip your toe in there a little bit as a young man, and then I think a big one for me is like Alex, our guitarist. His parents in particular were really big prog rock heads, like massive prog rock fans, and like that's, I mean, you can't hear it too much when Alex is playing, but a lot of that I think has influenced how he plays. And you know, when we were kids, he was like a kind of virtuoso, like bedroom guitarist. He's going to kill me for saying this, but you know, it's like, you know, he could play like an entire Yes album by himself, you know what I mean? And so
No kid
basically,
should be able to do that.
I know, it's weird. It's really odd. You know, we're like listen to like you say, like listen to Blink-182, and he's like, "Have you heard of the Foxtrot before by Genesis?" And it's like, but anyway, this is the reason why I think we all kind of bonded. Is, you know, we'd go around his house and we'd hang out as teenagers, and very slowly we'd start going through. You know, his parents were some of the only parents that, you know, had a big record collection and a record player, and we'd be going through this stuff, and it would be, you know, I'm quite a visual person. It'd be like pulling out record sleeves and looking at record sleeves. And I remember we pulled out, you know, the front cover of In the Court of the Crimson King with that
That'll do
screaming
it.
face, you know, and you're like, what is that? Like, I mean, it's kind of horrible, but kind of
It's an
enticing.
amazing cover, though, isn't it?
I mean, it's incredible. It kind of really describes what that record is in so
Mm.
many ways. And so you put it on, you know, in the first song, and you've got this weird, like, I suppose it's kind of like Mellotron, like boo, boo. And then suddenly that riff, that ba da 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 da, and you're just like, whoa, like what is this? And it's like kind of proto heavy metal, but it's
Yeah.
really proggy. It's got that jazz drumming from Bill Bruford, like that absolute like, and then it's got suddenly like you're suddenly getting into all these time signatures, and you're like, what? And I remember as like a kind of teenager being like, what is this? Like, this is mad. And
Yeah.
I think that took us down this kind of gateway of like, yeah, starting to listen to kind of progressive rock, which then takes you into being like, oh, you know, like I'll listen to, you know, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, you know,
Yeah.
and then suddenly you're listening to Radiohead, and then suddenly you're listening to all this different stuff. And then in a weird kind of way, it leads you all the way back around again, and it takes you back to like punk in a way, you know, it takes you back to this like idea of like, what are the people that are then making the music after that? Like, why are they reacting to this stuff? And so, yeah, so I think that for me was like a really big gateway drug on this kind of musical journey. I think for me, I love putting music in context and kind of historical context or social context
Yeah.
or kind of critical context. So, it takes you on this journey. You're like, shit, like, oh, this like influenced, like early Black Sabbath, or
Yeah.
like there was something going on here. There was an exchange here that was happening, or they played with the Stones in Hyde Park. Like, how the fuck did that happen? And like, yeah. And I think that for me
I
was like,
love
it's
joining the
why,
dots like that. It's
oh,
great,
it's
isn't
so
it?
exciting. It's you'll never, I never get bored of it, man. Like, I
Yeah.
just love it. And maybe it becomes a bit obsessive and a bit weird,
Yeah.
like, of like, oh, what did this band do then?
Yeah.
But I think certainly as a young person, like discovering music for the first time and listening to records for the first time, it never gets boring.
Mm.
It's so exciting to just be like, oh, right. So these guys were in this band, and then they're in this band, and then this, and it opens your mind to so many
Mm.
things. And yeah, it's just brilliant, man. Like, so yeah, I think I will always love. There will always be a soft spot for like really wiggy progressive rock in my heart, and my, like, yeah,
Love
like
it.
I can't ever get away from it, even though you progress suddenly to rejecting that. I think as
Yeah.
you get older, you're like, oh no, yeah, no, it was good, wasn't
But do you know what? There is. I mean, there's a track that you've picked later on, and we'll maybe hark back to prog, because I think as anarchic and as punk as one of the other tracks you've chosen for later on, I can definitely hear the kind of weird time signatures and stuff like
Yeah,
that are definitely pulled from prog, and the bands that some that then went on to form after. Well, we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but um, but let's stay in the sort of more formative years now. And I'm going to ask Charlie for track 3 to tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please, mate.
Wow. Okay, so this is kind of, yeah. I think I'm gonna go for, I'm gonna say Talking Heads, Born Under Punches.
Yeah,
This is again that lead on from prog, and this is kind of a big, I think a big moment for me in learning about, you know about new wave and punk, and art in music as well. I think,
yeah,
and being an artist in music. And yeah, this was kind of around 16 that I found this record. And I think it was actually, weirdly, we came to this record from again, another friend who, I think his parents had a copy of Stop Making Sense, the live video, on like
yeah,
VHS. And I think we were like bumming around his house one day, mucking around, listening to music. And I think again, it was like his dad that was like, watch this. And we were like, what the hell's this? And again, I think for me, it really resonated for me in terms of like, I think I've always been drawn to people that are quite conceptual in their art, and want to talk about ideas. And seeing David Byrne up there in the giant suit,
that'll
and seeing
fucking
the,
do it.
I mean,
Fucking
yeah,
hell.
and like seeing, from the start, Madison Square Garden, he comes on stage with the fucking boombox, and it's like, you're looking at this, and it's such an antithesis of, I think, what I was experiencing through, I suppose, what you would call mainstream culture. There, do you know what I mean? Like, maybe it was because, it was like Alien Ant Farm or Sum 41, who are great in their own way. Do you know what I
Yep,
mean? But
yep.
like, but it's not necessarily talking about concepts or ideas. And I think for me, it was quite mind blowing to kind of have that world open up and be like, this guy's like a conceptual artist. Do
And
you know what I mean?
still
Like,
is. And still
and
is.
is, yeah, and just keeps being, and it's all just about communication and
Mm,
communicating ideas. Not only are the songs incredible, but it's about the feeling behind it and the
yeah.
ideas. And I think that for me as a young person was quite, it's quite kind of profound. It was like, God, you can be, you don't just have to be like a
Mm,
rock star, in inverted. You don't have to be the guy in the last gang in town in your leather
yeah,
jacket, kind of riding up, being like, fuck the system. You can be a kind of awkward guy who
yeah,
turns up turns up in a great big suit, and talks about shopping, or
yeah,
nothing being on the telly, or working in the government.
yeah.
It's yeah. I think that I'll always kind of remember that, and kind of treasure that. And I'm lucky that the music happens to be amazing as well. It's
Yeah.
something that I always kind of come back to, and soundtracks my life. Like Naive Melody was one of my wife's and I's like first dances at a wedding, and
Oh, lovely.
all those moments. Do you know what I mean? That, like, yeah, I just love it. So yeah, that's gonna be up there for me.
I grew up outside of London, just a bit further around the M25 than yourself. Um, and I just remember there was always graffiti outside my school, and it was just someone had like sprayed Pink Floyd, and someone had sprayed Talking Heads. I remember thinking, Talking Heads, that sounds weird. And I went to the library, my local library, and I think the album was Creatures, I think.
Oh,
And
great record.
I just looked at the sleeve and then flipped it out. It's the one, yeah, on the back of it, it's all four of them standing there in
Yeah.
like mad outfits, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
remember thinking, and I remember getting it from the library, like renting it from the library and taking it home and just putting it on and hearing like, and she was, and so I was like, fuck, this is
Yeah.
amazing. What is this? And
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think I was probably like maybe 12, 13. And then like it was, I've just got to get me David Byrne stuff out of my system now because you've started me, and it's like, and he just blew my mind. And then I got the VHS to Stop Making Sense, and I
Oh,
watched that, and I was like, this is, I don't know what's going on, but I'm
yeah.
drawn to
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
like it's awkward, it's weird, it's just strange, and like, and I think as a kid, like, you know, I think young people are always drawn to, I think something a little left field and odd, and whether it be like
Mhm.
horror films, you're trying
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
explore things, aren't you? You're trying to find out like what makes things tick. And I think,
Yeah.
I don't know, I saw that Stop Making Sense, and it blew my mind, and I was like,
Yeah.
what is this? And then thankfully I managed to like, which I'm sure we're going to sort of get onto. You start to find your clique, and you surround yourself with other like-minded people that kind of like that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like, you heard that? And it's like, oh yeah, I've heard like Road to Nowhere. I'm like, oh, they've got other ones, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Better. Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's man, it's so true. And that thing that you just said there, so like, talking about it being strange and slightly uncanny, and it maybe is that counterpoint to like the proggy stuff I was talking about earlier. Their version of strange is like wearing a cape and doing King Arthur
yeah.
on Ice. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's
I
like
mean, that's
the way that,
strange.
which is strange. It's kind of like, it's kind of almost like trying too hard. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean? It's trying too hard to be a bit quirky. And the thing about David Byrne is, it's just, you just believe it.
yeah.
It's strange in such a singular way, and
Mm.
such a kind of profound kind of way about like the everyday. And it's like when you're a kid as well, you're looking at that and you're like, he's making a song up about like buying food. Like
Yeah,
what's that about? Like, you can write about that, you can talk about that, or
yeah,
like you can. I mean, I think you're so right. Like that, it's you're looking for something that kind of talks to you as a young person, and when you find those moments, even and even though that record was, you know, at that point for me, like 15, 20 years old or whatever it is, I think that's just the power of something like that, that like the
yeah,
ideas just translate through the ages, and it's as
yeah.
relevant now as it was then.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, man. I mean, I love that graffiti on the wall, Pink Floyd. We're talking so good. I mean, it's also kind of like it's so suburban in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the other thing about this stuff is like, growing up in a suburb of a big city
Yeah.
or whatever. Like, there's a kind of there's a safety to it, which can be
Mm,
incredibly powerful for you as a person growing up as a
mm.
as a, as a child. And I mean safety in terms of like there's a kind of there's a prevailing way of doing things, and people
Yeah,
don't necessarily transgress, or they don't appear to transgress.
yeah,
And I think that is, when you find this stuff, and it kind of blows the doors off that sometimes,
yeah,
that like it starts to make you realize there's a wider world out there.
yeah. I should also kind of sort of add a little yin to the yang. As much as them bits of pivotal graffiti were very profound and changed my life, I think I was also thinking, I lived, I grew up in a very, very kind of pretty rough working class area, and I remember sort of like thinking, oh, they've spelt that right as well. But then there was also the other big famous piece of graffiti was around the back of the garages at my school,
Yeah.
which said in big letters, "Terry is a wonker." Which
Oh
probably had
mate.
an incredible effect on me as well. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
they've spelt it with an O, not an A. Amazing.
yeah. Yeah, I think we had that. We had an underpass down to our school as well that was like, one of those underpasses where they're like, we'll build an underpass to keep the children safe from this giant road. And it's like, you've built an underpass to make children fear there for their life because there's terrified people down there. There's the big kids smoking down there. They're going to kill you.
100%. Yeah, you're going to get killed in that underpass that smells of piss.
Yeah. Someone's got a moped down there. They're just running. Yeah. Don't worry about that. Yeah. We'll keep the kids safe from the road and invite the terrified people down here. Yeah.
Zebra crossing's fine, please.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's move on to track 4, and I'm going to ask you, please, to tell me the first song you remember buying from a record shop, please.
Yeah. So this is. It's not necessarily the first song, the first single, and I will be open about this. Was Jimmy Nail, Crocodile Shoes?
Nice.
Because my dad used to watch Alvida's Own Pet because he was a builder, so it's like. But the first album proper that I bought, and I'm very glad about that. It's a good choice. It was Relationship of Command by At the Drive-In.
Right, do you know what? You've chose your songs have been too fucking cool so far, right? So before we get on At the Drive-In, let's talk about Jimmy Nail for a bit. Your first record's got to be a howler, mate. I'm not letting you have At the Drive-In.
That's my first single, Crocodile Shoes, Jimmy Nail. I think I got that from Woolworths with my gran for about I think it's about £1.50 or something.
Yeah,
I absolutely love that tune. I must have been about 12, and I was like, no, younger, must have been younger, like 9 or something.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him doing it on Top of the Pops, and I was like, I think it was like the same week that Blur did like song 2. And rather than going by like Blur, I was like, Jimmy Nail's the guy for me.
I want to buy that record by that bloke who looks like a painter and decorator. That looks good.
Yeah, probably like it looks like dad's friend, like Terry or whatever. Like, yeah, if Terry can do it, so can I. But yeah, Crocodile Shoes, that was a big one. And then I think the second single might have been Will Smith, the Men in Black theme tune.
Nice.
I think that was a banger. But I was like working my way up to albums. I think as a kid you don't want albums. I didn't. I was like. When you're like 9, 10, you just want the song, play it over and over again on tape in the car until the tape all spools out.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, let's talk At the Drive-In then, because that was the band that I was referencing when you was talking about, Bananas time signatures and prog influence, maybe more so in Mars Volta, but definitely, I mean, how old would you have been when you got that?
So I think I must have been about 12 or 13. And the reason I got this was, and this is again a bit of a segue moment. It must have been one of the kind of first or second times I'd watched Jules Holland with my dad. My dad.
This was where I was going to go with it. I was going to say, did you see that?
Yeah, this is actually probably out of all of those things, one of those moments that is just so clear in my mind about seeing that. So I think obviously big Top of the Pops fan growing up, used to watch it every week, blah, blah, blah. And I think then my dad had said at some point, oh, there's another thing called Jules Holland with this other kind of music. Do you want to stay up and watch it with me or something? And I remember sitting in the living room and my dad, he's not a smoker anymore, but he used to smoke Dunhill.
Yeah.
Packet of Dunhill on the go, smoking fags. And I'd be sat, I think I remember sitting like on the floor by the sofa, 12 or 13, watching it, and I think it was like the same week that is it like Robbie Williams was on or something. I've gone back and watched it over and over again now because I just remember so clearly being like, Jules Holland doing this, At the Drive-In, and they came on and it was like, what in the fuck is this? Like it was so mad, all over the place. I think at one point the guitar's on the floor, he's standing on a chair. They keep cutting to images of the audience. Robbie Williams looks like he's having an aneurysm. He's like, what's going on? And I think my dad even said, like, this is shit or something like that. And I just thought, it is, but it's great.
Yeah.
And it was just this like, what is happening? It felt really dangerous, really weird and really out of control. And I remember then, the next day going into town with my mate Ed, who is now the drummer in the band. And both of us having rung each other up on our landlines, because just before we'd got mobile phones, in the morning and being like, did you see that on the telly last night? And being like, yeah, we fucking did. And we went and both bought it and listen. And I remember listening to it on the bus on the way back on my little CD Walkman and being like, and not even really knowing if I liked it. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it was like so abrasive and so weird,
Yeah.
but being like, there's something here. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, yeah, I mean that Jules Holland performance is just, yeah, so clear in my
Yeah.
mind. That and Jimmy Nail Crocodile Shoes, two.
I don't know if he done Jules, but probably.
Yeah, probably.
Someone else chose a Jimmy Nail track literally a couple
Really?
of weeks ago. I don't know because I don't know how much you know about Jimmy Nail's career. For some reason, I know a lot more than I should. Uh, but he had a one-off hit, like in like maybe the sort of about '87 with a cover of
Right.
Rolls Royce "Love Don't Live Here Anymore."
Was
Like
that because it was on Alvida's Aim Pet?
must have been around the time of a
Right, right,
Wiedeson
right.
Pet.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then he sort of like just music didn't become anything. And then I guess he done. I can't. It must have been Crocodile Shoes was a big show, wasn't it? But he ended up like he was like a Hollywood movie star for a while. He was in
Yeah.
Evita with Madonna,
Yeah.
and then he released that. Can you remember that "Ain't No Doubt" single?
Yeah, yeah.
Went to
Yeah, I
number
do.
one, and you've
I
just got
think
this
Crocodile Shoes did as well.
just insane that this geezer that looks like he's had a couple of tear ups in your local, and they've put a decent suit on him, like he's going to an interview, and they've put him on top of the pops, and he's nailing it. It's like
Mate,
it makes no
I
sense.
again wholesale. I was in, man. I was at 12-year-old me. I was like, this guy's great.
Oh mate, that must have been some craziness going on in your head, trying to make sense of the driving and Jimmy now at the same time, man.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of reasons why I'm like this now. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, wonderful. Let's talk about clubbing and for track 5, I asked guests to talk to tell us about a song that soundtrack their year's clubbing, and I should always stress that when I send this question, sometimes I think guests may think like, well, I didn't really have them days in, neon coated clubs like with my shirt off, raving to whatever. This can be your local indie night. This can be, a dirty
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
dive bar. Anything that kind of was them formative years of like when you
yeah,
found your click and you go out and experience music land.
yeah, yeah. I think there's probably two here that we can kind of talk about. But I
Okay.
would say first one is probably it's Date with the Night. That really like soundtracks my kind of like I was lucky enough to go to art school. I was like the first person in my family to kind of go off and do like I suppose what we call higher education. And I think my parents are really proud of me going and but I think it was this. I think when you're talking about finding your tribe of people or your gang of people or your
Mhm.
clique, I think for me, I first of all went to like a local art college, and then I ended up in London at an art college called St Martin's, and it was like suddenly I was like, fuck, I thought everyone was the coolest fucking person I'd ever seen ever. It's like people like walking into college in like a bin bag and being like, yeah, this is my outfit for today, and you're like, what's happening? And you're like, that's so cool. And then so I felt like a bit of a kind of like I felt a bit bit provincial, if you know what
Yeah.
I mean. Everyone felt very worldly, and it was like very international. There's like people from all over the place, and I was like, oh, how's it going? But I think very soon you start to realize that like there was all these people that had the same interests suddenly, like from coming from a group of and I should say the guys that I'm in the band with, they've been my friends since I was 13, 14. It's the only band I've ever played in, and they're like my brothers. But like there was a group of probably about 6 of us, 2 other guys as well, that were the people in our school and our college that were into the stuff that we're into. So you have a bit of an outsider mentality. You have a bit of a kind of like we all had like long hair and dressed in mad stuff for
Yeah.
our town, and then you kind of turn up at art school and you're like, whoa, there's all these people that are interested in the same stuff, and you mention something, they're like, yeah, I've seen that, or I've heard that, or I've done that, and you're like, what? Okay. And I think that for me was like this thing that was just suddenly you just feel like you just feel like you're where you're supposed to be, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think it was that time, it was that kind of, for want of a better word, kind of like new ravey. And I suppose it's kind of predate that a little bit, but again, everyone was looking to America for a lot of that culture. there was a lot of that kind of like New Yorky kind of stuff going on again. But then a bit later on, there was loads of great stuff happening in London and well, I suppose in Leeds as well. And you know, Enemy was a big thing at that point, where everyone would read the Enemy and be really, you know, it would be like a bit of a Bible as to like this. You should look at this or check this out. So yeah. I think, again, I think taking that kind of element of the stuff that was going on with, you know, people like Talking Heads and just updating it and supercharging it, and you've got this like, you know, Karen O's such an incredible front person, and like that those guitar sounds come from like Nick Zinner, and there's 3 of them, and it's just like elemental and raw, but kind of sexy and kind of like yeah, I don't know, it's just like everything that you wanted in a band when you're like 20, you know.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely. That's a good intro, that song as well.
oh, so good. Yeah. That would probably be up there with the Stooges, actually. Like,
Yeah,
and again, a lineage there, you know, that kind of like
massively.
that like element of vitality and like just an explosion of energy. I think,
Yeah.
I love that.
So where was clubbing? Was this happening? Was you going trash? Was trash happening then?
Yeah, that was happening. So yeah, that was going on, which was amazing at the time as well. You know, of Outkin and you know, like all those people coming through. I mean, like I think you saw like LCD Sound System do like a secret set there on like a Tuesday or something. Do you know what I mean? And then you got
Yeah.
like Klaxons and all of those people and
Yeah.
Shit Disco and
Yeah.
I mean, I'm literally running off the indie sleeves right now, you know.
Yeah. But when
stuff
you're
like that,
20, like that's the best time to
oh, it was
experience that
amazing.
kind of energy and madness, right?
I mean, we were at the old campus of St Martin's, which is on Charing Cross Road, and you know, it backed on our library, backed on to Soho, and underneath our library was Frog, you know, the club Frog,
Yeah.
and like, you know, you'd be sat there like doing something in the library and hear the sound check coming up from underneath, you know, and it was this, you know, it felt like you were in. It felt like you were in the center of stuff. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? From someone that hadn't necessarily felt that before. You're
Yeah.
like, and there's all these people, and everyone's kind of like really open to different things. And I think it was at that time in London as well, just before, you know, it was still that kind of time where you could like pop down to, you know, a pub in East London or South London and go, oh, have you got an upstairs you're not doing anything with? And they'd be like, yeah, give us 50 quid and you can put on an art show or a
Yeah.
weird gig. Or I'm sure that's still happening, you know. I just happen to be an old fucker that, you know, doesn't do it anymore. But I think, you know, it was before
I
the
don't think
time
you're
of
getting
like,
anything for 50 quid in East London
well, this is
anymore.
it. You know what I mean? I think this is it. You're not getting like the top of upstairs of a pub, because, you know, they
Yeah.
might have a, you know, pop-up restaurant in there or something, you know.
Yeah.
And it still was that point where there was these weird intersections of like, I don't know, like, again, everything's always better when you're younger. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
but it was kind
I'm
of,
not going to say it otherwise. It sounds really reductive. I'm
it must
sure
have
there.
been more affordable, and because obviously, you know, it's no secret. I don't think we're entering into granddad territory by saying the gentrification of these places has obviously impacted it massively, and I guess a lot of the things that suffer from that. As a club promoter that promoted events in East London for 20 years,
Yeah,
seeing that change like was insane. And you know, all of a sudden, the reasons why I went from Essex to London to promote was because I wanted to be immersed in a really exciting art scene, a gay scene, and
yeah,
where movement was happening. And
yeah,
then basically the areas that I went to in Shoreditch, all of a sudden those people couldn't afford to live there. So
yeah,
they were
yeah,
being pushed further and further outside, and then unfortunately, you know, I say unfortunately, I've got nothing but love for where I'm from, but the people that I kind of that I didn't think were interested in anything particularly left field in my hometown, they now all go en masse to East London, you know, to hear Beyonce in a club and to
but
go on
you
a
know,
hen do. And it's like,
I guess
I'm not being, I'm trying not to be a snobby wanker, but
yeah.
you know, it affected my job massively. The fact that and the demographic of people, and I'm not saying that they're any better or worse, but the demographic of people that would come to these events wasn't necessarily the demographic of people that I set these nights up to be, you know, to be for.
Yeah, I guess as well though, you know, to caveat that, you know, my generation and us doing that was probably part of the reason why it's like that. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? We were
100%.
moving into those spaces and I suppose, for want of a better word, gentrifying them. I think maybe the other thing that has changed slightly is, you know, and again, I know we maybe talked about leaving politics at the door, but you know, I came from a a lower income family, and
Yeah.
when I went to university, I got the full grant that I didn't have to pay back. You
Yeah.
know, I had help with my housing. Okay, I'm still paying my
That's a
student debt.
really good point, man. It's a really good
But
point.
do you know what I mean? Like I could afford to go to university because there was a safety net there for lower income people
Yeah.
to go to university. And I'm not even, we weren't. I've never wanted for anything in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've never lived in abject poverty. And I think that's the thing for me, is that like going and having that experience was kind of afforded to me, because what it said was, this is important for your growth as a person, or like this is important. Me going to do an art degree was not seen as like, oh, you're fucking wasting all that money, and and now I think that probably comes into people's heads, and it makes me really upset to think that there's people from income backgrounds that are the same as mine, or lower than mine, that aren't afforded that opportunity, and aren't afforded the opportunity to go and do all that stuff you're talking about, explore this stuff, and and go and put on an art show for 50 quid, or go and make a terrible record with your
Yeah.
mates, or go to a practice room that's in the center of town that doesn't cost 100 quid for 3 hours, do you know what I mean? I think that for me is the thing that's the saddest thing about it, is that it's like it's not just about where you're going to study and the things that you're going to go and learn from a course. It's about all of that, like all of that unquantifiable stuff, all of that energy, and those people that you meet, and the opinions that you find, and the conversations that you have, and the nights you go to, or the places you live. I think that's the saddest thing about it for me, that I look at now, and look at perhaps my student experience and the time that I was going, and
Yeah.
the music that was soundtracking it, is that I was permitted to do that, and
Yeah.
permitted to do that, and not get myself into like 100 grand's worth of debt,
100%. 100%.
But yeah,
All right.
but yeah, I'm the problem why why you can't put on the
It's
show
your
in East
fault.
London anymore. It's me.
Was there another track? Did you say you had two for this one?
Yeah, so the other one for me, and it's probably on the other side of the scale, was probably The Knife, and it would be Silent Shout. For me, that was the Knife, I think, was a big introduction to me to electronic music. That album Silent Shout, I think it's like 2009 kind of time, was like this record that I just played over and over and over again, partly because of the melody and the sounds and the atmosphere. It's quite a down kind of record. It
Yeah.
feels like it's a bit of a hangover to the party that I've maybe just described. But that for me was something that really got me into kind of listening to people like, James Holden, and a little bit of Minimal Tech, and then like Oni Ayu, who's the guy from The Knife as well. And kind of like, yeah, just got me into listening to, and then that again is a gateway into early house, and, listening to the sounds that they're making and being like, oh, that drum's a certain type of drum, it's an 808, and who's used that? Oh, it's used loads on sampling, or, in rap music and all that kind of stuff. So I would say that's another big thing for me. And I was lucky enough to see them when they came and played in London. They did 2 shows in London kind of just before they kind of, I suppose, quit. And yeah, it was like a very, again, talking about like performance art and like concepts. I mean, the last show that I saw, they start out it was all very dour, and how you expect a Knife out kind of hour of the Knife's music to be presented. And then suddenly midway through the second track, they all kind of picked up these like giant instruments, like, and you realize they were like made out of balsa wood, and they just kind of threw them over to the edge of the stage, and then suddenly basically did this thing that was kind of like techno Starlight Express. It was like bizarre. It was like, yeah, and it was like, and then you couldn't tell who the singer was, because she like disguised herself. So then you realize that actually she was for half of it on the sound desk behind us, like singing into a microphone, and she wasn't even on the stage. It was wild. People were leaving because they were like, this is not what I expect. It was like, yeah, I mean, it was, the warm-up was an aerobics instructor. Like that was the support act. And then the show didn't end. It just progressed into like a club night. Like, didn't end. It just like carried on. And then suddenly you realize halfway through, I was just someone DJing. It's like, do I leave now? Do I stay? Like, oh man, it was one of those
Sounds
ones where you're like,
amazing.
it was great. It was really amazing, man. It was really strange. And there was a lot of like people there that I think had gone to go and see it as this like very like, I'm going to be presented with this music, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like, you know, serious, you know,
Yeah.
artistic music. And they just said, fuck that. And that was something that was really powerful. So I think for me, like, that's the yin and the yang to that kind of
Yeah.
time in my life, you know, like, I'd say the Knife are that kind of like maybe less hedonistic,
Yeah.
that kind of, certainly that iteration of the Knife, you know,
Yeah.
kind of like quite kind of a bit dour sometimes,
Yeah.
but I like,
Yeah.
you know, like a bit of dour music.
Well, I'm going to take you home for track 6, and I'm going to ask you,
Yeah.
please, for a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
Home county. Okay, well, let's swap this up a little bit.
What's home
Let's
county? Are we going Hertfordshire now?
No, we're going Surrey. That's how I
We're
grew
going
up. So I
Surrey,
grew
right?
up
Okay,
kind of just between Woking and Guildford.
right.
So let's go. Everyone's favourite Woking boys. I'm going to change it up from what I sent you. I'm going to say, let's say the Jam down at the tube station at midnight.
Oh, do you know what? The energy in that record, like, it just screams
So
young,
good.
angry lads, doesn't it? It's fucking great. Oh,
It's good, man. It's they are, you know, and I think when you're looking around as a young person as well, you're looking around for, you know, bands that are like from where you're from. I mean, the two ones from Surrey, I suppose, are the Stranglers and the
yeah,
Jam, you know. And again, I love the Stranglers as
yeah,
well, but the Jam, yeah, there's like that that record's so good. I mean, it just, his way of telling a story, his way of I suppose just like constructing a narrative that feels really believable as well.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? I think that's the thing. And there's an energy to that song, but there's also like it's a bit like it's nervous. You know, you
yeah.
can tell that like it's an experience that perhaps he's
It's
kind
that
of been part.
urgency,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, 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 yeah. It's you know, and I think as a young person as well, it's that thing of like viewing you know, he you can see he's writing through a lens of like a supposedly older person, but it's got all of that like fear of being
yeah,
away from home, of being in a space that you're not necessarily comfortable with, that nervous energy, that
mm,
aggression, all of that stuff. Yeah, he's great, man. And like, yeah, I think when you're talking about bands that are from, you know, from where you grew up, Nick grew up in Woking and stuff, and you know, yeah, it's like, yeah, that's a pretty good one to have.
absolutely, absolutely. I think like the social commentary in the Jam and the Style Council. I mean, I'm kind of
Yeah,
I don't sort of listen to his solo material too much. It's not, really does
yeah,
a great deal for me. But being sort of, I'm 49, so I kind of just caught the very end of the Jam, but I caught the
yeah,
Style Council,
yeah,
and I just think them two bands, the body of work that they've got, fucking
yeah.
incredible, man. Absolutely incredible. And I get the fanaticism around Weller, or are they called the ones that have all got his haircut? They're called well ends, aren't they? Like, which,
I
which,
mean, I get it too. I mean, I think the other thing that I find so incredibly impressive is, you know, I feel like I'm only just like musically hitting my stride or artistically hitting my stride at 34 years of age. And you look at that period where he's in the Jam, that like what, 5 years or something, and he's like 19,
so
20.
young.
And you're like, how have you done that? Like,
Yeah,
how have you got that like prescience to talk
yeah,
about this stuff, or it's in your head? Like,
yeah.
I couldn't have done that at 19. I was like, you
I,
know, it's really really special, you know.
it really is, and I think every band needs that one person that's got that little bit of extra drive, and is the leader in the band, for want of a better
Yeah,
description.
yeah,
And I think, I don't know if you ever heard it. I think, was he on Adam Buxton's podcast? I can't think. It was an interview with Johnny Marr, and he was saying that, I think, when he was like literally churning out, like, on a daily basis, just
yeah, yeah,
incredible records,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
the Smiths were at, I think they were. He said we was playing in America, and he said, and we were selling out like bigger venues than Tears for Fears, who were this global like
yeah,
rock
yeah,
band.
yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
said, but we was still a bit of a secret, but we was selling like massive venues out. He was essentially, obviously, just had this bananas creative spell of just writing all of that incredible music, but he was like, yeah, and I was pretty much like managing the band.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah,
and he's like, was like 1920, and you just think, imagine being able to do all of that and then having to try and manage. Obviously, I'm sure Rough Trade and the label, were being involved to a degree, of course. But he explained that he would be tour managing it pretty much and just putting it all together. And it ain't just dealing with like normal people. You got to fucking deal with Morrissey. Do you know what I mean? Imagine that as
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, oh,
Absolute
fuck me, I've got
nightmare.
him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
I
and it
mean,
is, and I think that like the Weller and the Mart and the people, there's a reason that they're so revered, because I just think that to harness that, and I guess you look at when you see them early videos of Alex Turner, you see them at like
yeah, yeah,
that don't Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor video, and you see he
yeah,
looks about 12, and you
yeah,
just
yeah,
think
yeah,
like
yeah.
you're writing that level of social commentary on that debut album, like you think there's a few, I think that there's a reason that these people are revered and are credited,
Yeah,
because
I
I
think
think
you're really right. Yeah, you are. You're really, really right, and you're really right in terms of like, and I think it could be across any genre, any like mentioned Beyonce earlier, and
yeah,
that's someone that has lived their life in the spotlight to
100%,
varying degrees of like ups and
yeah,
downs. You again, then you talk about Alex Turner, who, like you say, is like what, like 17, 18, the first. I just think, how do you? I don't know. Like, I don't know how you'd handle it either. That's
yeah,
the other thing. Like, I'm I find it mind blowing that you want to get me on a podcast and chat, and have a conversation like this, and to have that level of fame at such a young age, and to have people kind of essentially tell you like you're a genius, or that, I mean, how do and all these people seem relatively like well adjusted,
yeah, I
or
know,
or relatively like they consistently make work that speaks to like elemental
yeah,
human truth, and they haven't just gone off the deep end, and I don't know. I think it's really something quite yeah, there is a level of kind of I suppose talent and drive and all of those kind of things that make I don't know, whatever you call it, that is quite hard to kind of process sometimes.
it must involve like who you're surrounded by, who your friends are, who your
Yeah.
family are. I think a lot of working class people, whatever your mates do, if they're a dick, you'll always go, "Yeah, mate, fucking hell, wind it in." Like you're looking like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
right
there is
fucking
that. Yeah,
idiot
you
right
can't.
now. Do you know
Yeah,
what I
you
mean?
can't get too big for your boots. Yeah, no
Yeah,
one said. Yeah, you still got to go home and help, like help, like do like cut the grass for your dad or something.
hundred
Yeah,
percent,
yeah.
100%. And I guess like the Jams manager was tour manager was Weller's
His
dad,
dad,
wasn't
wasn't
it?
it? Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, so you ain't gonna get away with nothing there, are you? If your old man's like reining you in. Okay.
Well, yeah, you probably got to watch out though if you take your dad on tour. I think my dad would probably like it too much.
Back on the Dunhills.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Give it a week.
All right, last track, mate. I'm going to ask you to be a tastemaker now, and I'm going to ask you to tell the listeners about a song that you think they may not have heard.
Okay. Well, this is a band. Again, I'll mix it up a little bit. This is a band that toured with us last year. They're called English Teacher, and this is a song called Mental Maths. I love them, and I think they have got such an. I mean, they're a great band, but they've just got such an incredible front person in Lily Fontaine, who leads them.
Lily
She again,
Fontaine.
Lily Fontaine is her
What a
name.
fucking cool name.
She's great. And if you want to talk about social commentary and you want to talk about I don't know, just the kind of prescience in songwriting, I think she's brilliant. She's really brilliant and it's I think it's quite different to how a lot of other bands and maybe us included have talked about stuff recently. I think there's a real level of like it's rooted in the self, which I think is really, really interesting. Her lyrics are so kind of based in, it feels like when you're listening to them, so kind of based in who she is. And yeah, I think, it's just, I'm just, every time they put a song out, every time we've seen them play live, or they just kind of get better, and I think that for me is really exciting. Seeing someone, you know, they're gonna far they're gonna far surpass us soon. You know, like already have. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of their creative output, and I think that for me is so exciting when you're a fan of a band to see someone just, and not just her, the rest of the band. Like every time you
Yeah.
see them, just get better and better and better. And yeah, so I'm gonna recommend English Teacher. I think they're really really great. I cannot say enough good things about them.
Wonderful. Well, we put together a Spotify playlist to accompany the podcast so people can go and check out all the tracks that we've spoken about today. So moving forwards for the remainder of 2022, what's happening?
We've just put a record out, our second record, which has been nerve-wracking but fun. You know how it is when you put something in the world, throw something into the internet void. But no, it's been really great. The response has been really nice. So we're going to be touring that. We're off to America this time next month. There for a month or so, playing for the first time out there, which is going to be really exciting. Then we're back doing festivals, and we've got a European tour kind of September, October, and then touring the UK October, November. So we're quite busy chaps, and then potentially, you heard it here first, going in and recording again towards the end of the year. I think we've probably got another record kind of on the way, which I'm excited about. Yeah, so it's going to be really busy, and I've also got another baby being born in between all of that.
Wow,
So
that's some year you've got coming up, mate.
yeah, there's a bit going on. I've got a very forgiving, beautiful wife who is okay with me basically just swanning off and going to play shows as a 34-year-old dad.
Living the dream, mate.
Yes, yeah.
If people want to keep up to speed with all of the aforementioned stuff that's coming up, where's the best place to keep up to speed with what you're up to?
Hit us up on social media. We're TV Priest. Yeah, and find us there. You know, if you don't find Father Ted, you'll find us.
Well, if it's cool with you, we'll tag you in it when we put this out.
100%.
Lovely, Charlie. Honestly, mate, I've had such a blast today. It's been lovely.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on,
you.
man. Honestly, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure, mate. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to press stop.